Hi everyone, it's Rax. Today was a very interesting day for my stream and everyone in the Path of Exile 2 community. They released their 55 pages of patch notes that are coming out on Friday, and they warned us in the interview with DM and Gazzy that it was going to be viewed as a giant nerf fest. They crucified a lot of the builds. In my opinion, out of every build guide that I've ever made you on my YouTube, and there's quite a few of them for POE2, I think only one of them is going to survive as far as I know, and that would be the Lightning Arrow Deadeye. Minion Witch, the Spark Sorcerer, all those, gone. So anyway, let me take you through the changes here, and then I'll give you my opinion at the end of it. We're going to kind of rip through these 55 pages. What I did was I read every single word on stream, talked to Fubgun, talked to Gazzy about our thoughts. I highlighted anything that might be of interest to you guys in teal. And I'm not going to cover things that we already learned from the interview. If you watch my previous video, the summary of the interview, we learned some things there. So I'm not going to go over the same stuff. So all this should be fresh. Okay, that's enough. Let's get started. So first of all of your old characters from early access are still going to be there. You get a free passive tree refund. So in the new league that starts on Friday, if you don't want to start all over, you can use your existing character and you get a free respec. And you might need it because they nerfed everything. Scroll down here. Now they're adding rogue exiles to the game. We knew that. If you don't know what those are, they're really tough enemies. And they are going to be equipped with unique items in the game. If you beat them, you're going to acquire those unique items. So if you're really looking for a special hat and they happen to be wearing it, if you beat it, you get the hat. Easy as that. They're introducing Twilight Reliquary keys. These were also in POE1. It's just like a special key to open a special item and try to get something godly. Cool addition to add. However, in POE2, they can contain any unique except if it's a pinnacle boss drop. Only special keys dropped by the relevant content will be able to provide you with those items. So I don't know how that's going to work with trade or on the drops, that there's going to be a distinction, but not every key can give you every item. Essences in the game, you can now apply Val Orbs to them to corrupt them, get unpredictable outcomes, and greater essences can now be upgraded to one of 4 new essences. Endgame Changes. Corrupting areas no longer gives +1 to the area level, and there's this whole cleansing and corruption thing with the corrupted nexuses that we already covered in the interview video. Fracturing Orbs, just as a reminder, is going to take a random modifier on a rare and lock it in place forever. It's the first real addition to crafting in POE2. They now added 6 portals to a map, and they're going to go down with the number of modifiers that you add to the waystones. One thing that they said that they would hope to do, that they did deliver on, is it's now based on deaths. So as long as you haven't died, you can keep going through the portals and it won't consume them. That way, if you're really juicing your maps, then you can just keep going back in to pick up all your loot. That's a nice change. And then with the respawning system, every player gets their own respawns, but if you start a boss fight, then the respawning system will let the leader respawn everyone in general. That's so you have to kill the boss from full life. They said if you rush the boss and don't do any of the other content, then it's only going to let you keep fighting the boss to avoid some exploits about getting the same rewards. The number of towers on the Atlas tree went down dramatically, but they got buffed dramatically, and the tablets now add a lot more mechanics. So by tier 15, your bonuses get doubled, and so a single tablet is going to have 4 times as many things as before. Elon would love to hear that. So how waystones are obtained are redesigned. They're just essentially going to make the sustain a lot easier. You can't get waystones lower than the map that you're on. The waystones from the final boss are always 1 tier higher. And the final map boss and the final naturally occurring, I believe that means like you don't want to add more from mechanics like breach or something, have a 100% chance to drop a waystone, and that scales down later. Doriani, the vendor that sells waystones, now has much better stuff to help with sustain again. You want to look for these unique maps on your Atlas tree now, because now they're going to give you 2 Atlas passive points. And now you're going to be able to get up to 40 points instead of 30. There's a new crafting mechanic called recombination. If you played POE1, you probably know what it is. You take two items and you slam them together, and you try to take the good mods on each item and combine them. So if this one has attack speed and this one has crit, you try to merge them. If you fail, they're destroyed in POE2, and I believe the chances will probably be pretty low. But they said you might be able to get a 3 or 4 item, 3 or 4 affix item that you're looking for with recombinating. That's still pretty good. Again, they're adding some crafting to the game. That's nice. So far, you're probably thinking, wow, these patch notes are great. Well, let's keep going here. All bosses that are affected by difficulty in Simulacrum drop all their specific unique items at any difficulty. This is good for the more casual players. It means that the very first difficulty of a boss, you could drop the best item in the game. That's good news for you. Pinnacle boss content now takes half of the time to unlock it. You're going to get to the bosses faster, and the T0 is about 50% easier. So you're going to actually get a chance to kill some pinnacle bosses. The number of monsters in Breach has been reduced. That's kind of sad because Breach was like the godliest endgame mechanic before. And omens now always appear as ritual rewards in map areas. God, that's good news because I never saw omens hardly ever play in the game. Now let's talk about the Atlas passive tree. So Deadly Evolution was replaced with Ecological Shift. Deadly Evolution was one of the best, maybe the best node on the entire tree because it gave modifiers to rare monsters, and that just gives you a lot more loot as you go through the maps. Now you have a 40% chance to get more random extra content, which I believe after talking to Fubgun is not like Breach or Expedition, none of the main things. It's actually like strong boxes or rogue exiles, but the cost that you pay is 20% less monster packs in your maps. That means less loot. That means less experience. It seems like it went from one of the best keystones to honestly one of the worst. We already covered that you now have 40 passive points. There's some other changes, but I'm hopefully just trying to hit the major ones I think you might care about. General improvements. There's a stash in the treasure room in the Trial of Chaos. That's nice. Improve the performance of summoning and reviving minions. This will conclude all good news about minions going forward. Now let's go to player changes. Freeze now builds up roughly 48% slower on enemies. That is a colossal nerf. How many of you guys played Ice Strike? And freezing the monsters was a great way for you to survive. It's going to be way harder to freeze enemies just across the board. Player base ailment threshold is now half of maximum life when before it was your maximum life. That means your chance to be shocked, ignited, or frozen goes up a lot. So you're going to have to actually build your character to solve these problems. The presence base radius is now 4 meters, and it was previously 6. This is a massive nerf. Whenever you have something like allies in your presence do 40% more damage, well, they got to be a lot closer to you now than before, so that kind of sucks. Ice crystals can no longer apply on-kill effects like Herald of Ash and Trample Toes Overkill. The ice crystals, I believe, are the mechanics attached to the sorcerer's frost wall. And that was one of their absolute best skills. You take the ice crystals and you lower their lives, and then they blow up and da-da-da-da-da. So this is too bad because that was a very, very good skill to use for the sorcerer. Heavy stun duration on players is now 3 seconds, previously 1. 3 times as bad. You also cannot block or evade while you are heavily stunned. You can be heavily stunned if you get hit too much when you're blocking or parrying, or you're riding around on the new mount, or if bosses heavy stun you. Being heavy stunned for 3 full seconds and not being able to block or evade the hits, as I think Grinding Gear Games put it this way in their interview, it's essentially going to kill you. So yeah, it's 3 times as deadly. And they also severely nerfed a lot of the stun threshold ways to gain that in the game. So it's going to be much easier for them to stun you. Should be anyway. So the base duration for Endurance Frenzy and Power Charges is now 15 seconds, and it used to be 20. Well, that's bad news because the Huntress is really relies on building charges, so now they got nerfed. Fully broken armor now causes enemies to take 20% increased physical damage. I took some notes on some specific parts to add some commentary here. So the gold is my text. Even though this says enemies take 20% increased physical damage from hits, this sounds like a buff, right? When you hit enemies, you break their armor, you do more damage. Remember from watching Kriparian's videos that all changes to armor usually impact the player as well. And Flubgun says, and at least he thinks, that this is also going to apply to us. That's the first thing that I thought when I read this as well. So if the enemies fully break your armor, you might also take 20% increased physical damage, which is going to get you killed. So I did have a question here. They said persistent minions granted by Ascendancy pass, or excuse me, not this one. Players and monsters now only count as moving while moving rather than for the full length of many animations. I was wondering if we count as moving when monsters move us, like when they throw a projectile at us and it moves us around. I wonder if that counts as well. It's not really clear to me. Setting a stat to a specific value, like Chaos Inoculation setting as 1 or Blood Magic setting mana at 0, now occurs before conversion is applied to that stat rather than being ignored by the conversion. So the armors like Ghost Wraith, which gave you a massive amount of energy shield, and Everlasting Gaze that had the nice tech between the sorcerer passives that gave you your energy shield back after you lost it. You can kiss those goodbye, and also later on you will see these two very popular items also, in addition to this change, got nerfed. Now they changed some things on the ascendancies. There's a couple that I want to call out here. So Gemling Legionnaire, I think the basic thing they were trying to do is buff some of the ascendancy nodes to make up for the fact that stat stacking is completely dead. So there was a thing that gave you +3 skill slots. Now it gives you either 20% increased damage for a red support gem, 6% skill speed for a green gem, or 20% crit for a blue support gem. Essentially, this seems like it will buff your offense a lot. Like if you have 1 or 2 main skills and they each have 5 supports of different colors, you get between 5 and 10 of these juicy little buffs. So the offense should go up at the cost of the defense going down because the 3 skill slots were usually used for defense like resistances. And then the Implanted Gems Ascendancy doesn't give you +1 to all skills. Instead, it gives you +2 to a specific skill. It seems like a buff again because usually there's one particular skill that you would benefit from scaling the most. And it looks like you should be able to do that from how I read it. The Pathfinder. So they added a Sustainable Practices Ascendancy passive skill. Gives you 30% of evasion rating. 30% of your evasion rating also grants elemental damage reduction, and it requires practical remedies. So the way that I understand this is it's probably a percent of a percent. If I'm understanding this right. So if your chance to evade is 50% from your evasion rating, you would take 30% of that, which would be 15, and that would apply as your elemental damage reduction. So that's a pretty good way to mitigate some of the elements there. Could be a pretty decent node for the Pathfinder. Invoker. Lead Me Through Grace now provides 1 spirit for 8 energy shield. It was 6. 1 spirit for 20 evasion. Adios, Ice Strike, just because it's going to be harder to get the spirit gems. We also had the nerf, by the way, to the freeze. Going to have colossal nerfs to the bell. You're going to see coming down the line. Have nerfs to the heralds. Everything's going bye-bye. So, Infernalist. The demon form skill granted by demonic possession has a cooldown of 15 seconds and a maximum demon flame of 10. You now lose a flat amount of life per demon flame rather than a percentage of your maximum life, and the dodge roll distance has been reduced. So, assuming the flat life that you lose is not out of control, I actually played this build. Overall, I think this will make Infernalist easier to play because when you first picked up Demon form, your Demon Flame, I believe, could scale infinitely. And then in the end, when you got more points, then you could limit it to 10 so you could sustain it forever. Now they're letting you pretty much sustain it forever from the beginning with a Demon Flame of 10. And then later on, you can upgrade it to go unlimited if you can handle surviving the life reduction if you want the extra spell damage from the built-up Demon Flame. So essentially, they should just be making this easier to play, more accessible. This, to me, is a big, big head-scratcher. The Loyal Hellhound Ascendancy passive no longer causes 20% of the damage from hits to be taken from your Hellhound's life before you. This was really the entire value of the Hellhound. I recommended the Minion Infernalist Witch to you guys. A lot of you guys played that build. The main reason for the Hellhound was just to help you out and take the hits for you. He doesn't do that much damage. He does apply an ignite. It's not exactly clear how valuable that is. Maybe there's some cool tech to use the ignite for now. But for 2 passive points, the fact that this Hellhound just doesn't take the damage for you, it doesn't make any sense for me. I just don't understand. Why would we take the Hellhound now? So this made me real sad to see. Stormweaver, I just literally wrote audio. So there's a lot of things that they nerfed here. Stormweaver and Spark was nerfed in pretty much every possible way you could imagine. Like, think of a way that something that you could build in Spark and it was nerfed. It's the Stormweaver. It's the number of jewel sockets. It's the actual passive tree. It's the notables. It's the uniques. It's Spark itself got crucified. It's all gone. So we go down here. 12 jewel sockets have been removed from the passive tree. So this is a mega impact to super endgame characters, not a big impact to maybe 90% of the player base. When you get to the end of PoE, jewel sockets are arguably the very best thing you can get. Jewels are absolutely insane in PoE2. This is why they're taking away like half of them, because they're just so incredibly strong. Eldritch Battery now has the additional property of doubling the mana cost. This is one of many devastating nerfs, and it's going to be very, very hard to understand like when we're going to be able to take Eldritch Battery if it doubles the mana cost of everything. Falcon Technique, another very, very popular notable, has been nerfed. You get 1% attack speed for 25 instead of 15. Master Fletchling notable, this was used with a lot of tech with Widow Hail and a lot of Quiver builds. They nerfed this severely, and this really hurts Poison Concoction. But there's even more bad news. Poison Concoction can't even use a bow going forward anyway, so the Widow Hail tech isn't there. Spaghettification, one of the absolute strongest passives. Now it gives you 13 to all attributes instead of 7% to all attributes. This is one of many bone-crushing nerfs to the Stat Stacker, which was the best, probably the pound for pound, the best build in the game. The what's the Ascendancy called? The Gemling Legionnaire. Yeah. So the whole gaining percentages of attributes everywhere is gone. Small passive nodes that used to give you increased effect from auras, they used to give you 8, now they give you 5. Part of the plan to nerf heralds. Now we get to the skills. So, the very first thing that they said is, many skills have had their base damage and or damage growth per level rebalanced. Most of these changes are not specifically mentioned below. So keep that in mind. Like, for example, there were a lot of notes here nerfing grenades that a lot of people were reading and questioning, like, wow, they're making grenades way worse. But maybe to compensate for that, they made their base damage higher. So we're going to have to see what additional changes come with these skills, but we can see the gist of what they're trying to do here. So the mana cost for all attacks, marks, and war cries has been reduced, mostly at higher gem levels. This is why, did you ever play Ice Strike Monk and you got a quarterstaff that had plus additional levels? I'm trying not to sneeze here, that's why I'm acting so weird. Have you ever had a quarterstaff at a really good one with like +4 levels to melee? You put it on, you ice strike once, and all your mana's gone. That's because the scaling of attacks at very high levels, the mana cost goes out of control. This is very good that they nerfed that. They adjusted minion damage and life scaling. General damage and life is the same early game, but lower than before at higher levels, especially past level 20. Well, you remember all those minion builds that I made for you, and I told you it scales really well in the end game and you can keep cooking? Well, it looks like they got a severe nerf. So adios endgame minions. Archmage is receiving a colossal nerf. If you did not know, Archmage is what's making Spark do so much damage. You just get a bajillion mana, and then it gives you 6% 6% extra damage as lightning for every 100 mana. And then the quality used to give you 2% extra lightning damage. So it used to be 8. Now it's 3. So 8 to 3, you might think, well, maybe that's still doable, but that's also compounded with all the other nerfs everywhere. Again, in the Ascendancy, wait till you see the Spark skill gem that they changed. It's in the passives. It's in the notables. Eldritch Battery costs double. It's just over and over. The jewel slots are gone. It's pretty much everywhere. But also the spells are now going to cost more. They're going to cost 6.1 instead of 5. So the mana costs are going to be ramping up as well. Huge nerf to Archmage. Bleeding Concoction, all the concoctions are going to have more ailments. You're going to see that a lot. So maybe Pathfinder is on the table. Cast on Minion Death now only gains energy when persistence minions are killed. That means you can't do Cast on Minion Death and cast like SRS, for example, the Raging Spirits. Can't do that anymore. Cast on Shock now gains 1 energy per power, and it used to gain 2. So they already nerfed. Remember, one of the first builds we ever made was Cast on Freeze, and they nerfed it, and they nerfed Cast on Shock. But now they're nerfing Cast on Shock again. So kind of brutal. Combat Frenzy has a Gain Frenzy charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy no more often than every 4 seconds. So this is going to be way harder to get your charged staff on builds like Ice Strike. The concoction skills. Okay. This is maybe a little bit more in depth. Maybe I could sit here and ramble here, but I guess let me summarize this. Here's the thing. The concoction skills. They now require an unarmed weapon set. That means you can't use a Widow Hail anymore. Not sure if I'm speaking your language, but that's a nerf. Here's the problem right here. They now consume 5 mana flash charges per use, and it was previously 3. There are almost no ways to gain mana charges in this game, and the concoction skills use your mana flask. You can gain 0.25 mana charges per second on the flask itself, and there are some passives right in front of Pathfinder that you can pick up that help you with flask charges. But even with both of those, and I played this. I have a super powerful poison concoction Pathfinder. So I know this build. I played it in hardcore SSF. I think I'm level like 92. I fought the Arbiter with it. Even with the 0.25 charges per second and the notables on the passive tree, unless you're insanely strong, especially in the end game, you will run out of flash charges. You will, especially on like a long boss fight. So I thought when it was 3 before, I already thought like the mana was something that you had to solve. You had to take like every way to solve it in the game to make it feel okay. Now they've almost doubled the cost. I don't think there's any way to help with the flash charges unless I'm missing something. I would love to know if there's anybody in the chat that plays these concoction builds that knows how to solve this. I would love to know. The solution is just do a shitload of damage so you don't have to throw very many. But if you don't, I don't know. From what I understand, I do not think this is a good change at all. You're going to notice that they nerfed a lot of the curses. They have a lower impact, and I believe they take longer to arm as well. All the curses got nerfed. Decompose. This is another big nerf to poison concoction. If you ever played it, you run around with decompose. It like I call them the farty boots. It causes little farts everywhere. It kills everything. They nerfed it. Let's go down a bit further. Flame Wall now, this is used in so many builds. Flame Wall now causes projectiles which pass through the wall to do 33 to 48 added fire damage at level 20. It used to be 91, so about half. And with the gem values at level 1 unchanged, more significant reductions past gem level 20. So Flame Wall, I mean, maybe this warranted a nerf because it was used so in so many builds. But it looks like it's going to be mostly an early game thing. Flammability, the curse, nerfed. Frost Wall, we talked about the ice crystals, now has a cooldown of 5 seconds. So that got nerfed again. That was one of their best skills. Grim Feast, just straight up removed. They're going to redesign it. I guess that makes sense. Grim Feast was absolutely insane. Probably should be removed. Hammer of the Gods no longer has a cooldown, but now requires 20 glory to use. It's a resource that gets built up by heavy stunning enemies. Now, heard from Karn, or I heard through the grapevine, let's say, that Karn, the Mega Warrior level 100 player Giga Chad, thinks that this is a buff. Bubgun and I read this as a big nerf. Like, I don't want to run around heavy stunning enemies in order to cast Hammer of the Gods. How exactly would this work on Pinnacle bosses? Are you going to give me a heavy stun or something on Pinnacle bosses or on bosses? It certainly doesn't sound good to me, but I guess if Karn can figure out how this might actually be a buff, then maybe it's better. I don't know. It doesn't sound good to me, but maybe I'm missing something. Okay. I think out of anything in the patch notes, this surprises me the most. So, Hexblast can now only detonate curses for which at least 50% of the duration has expired. This means it can never explode curses that have an infinite duration. Okay, so Hexblast. You cast a curse, you blast that curse on the enemy, they die. There is I believe it's a spirit gem in Path of Exile called Blasphemy that just constantly applies the curse that you have socketed in it around you. So you use Blasphemy, it curses everything around you, and then you hit him with Hex Blast. Makes sense, right? But Blasphemy turns the curse into an aura. And an aura is just kind of a persistent thing. It doesn't have a duration. So I'm guessing what this means is Hex Blast does not work if you're applying a curse with Blasphemy. If that is true, I have no idea how anyone will play Hex Blast. So what we are supposed to do is we're supposed to manually curse any enemy that we want to hit with our just main attack and then wait for 50% of it to have expired and then cast Hex Blast. Like, that sounds like the worst gameplay to me I've ever heard of for anything. I have no idea how Hex Blast would be playable. So the only thing I can think of is they don't want Hex Blast to be like a playable all the time skill. Maybe it's only used as like an execute or something. But this is maybe the biggest head scratcher for me. The fact if this is what it means, if it means Hex Blast cannot be used with curses applied by Blasphemy, I don't know. I don't know. Any Hex Blast players in the comments? What? I don't get it. And then they nerfed Hex Blast severely as well. Here's another nerf to Hypothermia, which is a curse. Lightning Rod Arrow now disappears after being chained 6 times at all gem levels. It used to be 14, so we got a lot less chains. I don't know if they're talking about Lightning Arrow or Lightning Rod or the combo, but this seems to be one of the only nerfs to Lightning Arrow, which is why I said that's maybe one of the builds that will still work. But remember, the very first line said they might change the damage of all the different skills. Maybe Lightning Arrow is getting crushed there. I have no idea. Pain Offering's aura now grants minions 58% increased damage. Used to be 44% more damage. And now they get 58% attack and cast speed, and it used to be 30. So I made a mistake here. I read this and I initially thought, this is better. 58 instead of 44? Yeah. 58 instead of 30? Hell yeah. Finally something got buffed. But you got to read closer. This is 58% increased damage. This is 44% more damage. If you did not know, More in POE2 is multiplicative. Increased is additive. Without getting too technical on the math, more is a lot better. So this is a nerf. This should be a buff. So I don't know. I get the POB. It depends on the character. It's probably roughly the same. We'd have to see. Perfect Strike. So Perfect Strike, if you did not know, it won all the POE2 races. I thought this was going to be nerfed pretty severely, but if you read through it, 35 used to be 45. It got nerfed, but I thought it might be nerfed more, but that's okay. I'm not complaining. We can leave it. Now, okay, here's another one. Poison Concoction. I played this build. I like this build a lot. So here is how poison works. Here's how I understand how poison works in Path of Exile 2. Poison is you do a hit, and then the hit says, let's take 20% of the physical damage that you did and 20% of the chaos damage that you did. And that is the base for how much poison damage you deal. Poison damage is chaos damage, and then you scale that up. So, Poison Concoction, when you throw it, it does chaos damage. 20% of that turns into the base poison, and then it ticks the poison for chaos damage. So you want to know what I did in my tree? And I don't know if I made a video for you yet about it, but I have the full planner. I was really excited to show it to you. A new godly build. My entire tree is buffing chaos damage and poisons. Now look at what this says. Poison Concoction now deals base physical damage instead of chaos damage. This is exactly what I didn't want to see. Because now the throw is physical. So now it's going to take 20% of my physical damage, and that's the base of the poison, and then it does chaos damage. My entire tree is buffing the chaos damage. So the only part I'm buffing is the magnitude of the 20% of the first hit. That first hit is not going to do any damage because I haven't been buffing physical damage. So now you're going to have to actually math it out and kind of strike a balance between, like, do I just make the initial hit as hard as possible and then kind of don't scale the chaos after it, or see if there's a way to somehow, obviously, a way to scale both? But this just became so much harder to theory craft. And if you have a bad base, if you hit for 2 damage, it doesn't matter if you have like 1,000% more damage. If you're multiplying that by 2, you're screwed. So probably the answer is you're going to have to just magnify the physical damage when you're doing Poison Concoction. I don't know. We're going to have to theory craft it, but that doesn't make any sense to me. I really don't know why they changed this, because it made a lot of sense to make a chaos build before. Anyway, Raging Spirit now has a duration of 5 seconds, used to be 4. Oh, a buff, nice. Oh, but now you summon 2 per spell cast. Used to summon 5. So remember that minion witch build guide that I made for you guys? I said, play this, all you beginners. You throw the flame walls, it spawns 5 Raging Spirits each time and you're cruising. Now you get 2. You're going to have to be spamming those flame walls to get anywhere near the same damage. Plus, there's a bunch of nerfs to minions. Plus, there's nerfs to minion itemization. Ugh, yeah. It's rough out here, boys. All right, skip all this. Are you ready for the Spark nerfs? Are you ready? This is just the nerf to Spark. Not Archmage, not Eldritch Battery, not Everlasting Gaze, not the number of jewel slots, not the Stormweaver. This is just the nerf to Spark. Well, you used to throw 14 projectiles plus 4, so that's 18. Now you throw 9 plus 0. So you lost half. Is that half of your projectiles? 9 versus 18. But to compensate, now they're, instead of giving you 19% projectile speed, now you get 30. So you lost 9 of your projectiles, but you gained 11% projectile speed. That's got to be one of the worst trade-offs ever. So Ugh. But there's something worse. Now we look at the quintuple nerf to the bell. Essentially, there's a lot of text here. The bell takes 10 combo hits instead of 4, and you've lost 13 hits. 13 hits. Used to have 19 plus 2. And now you have 10 plus 2. Wait, now you have 10 plus 2. Used to have 19 plus 6. Whatever. I think it's 13. You lost 13 hits. This is why we read the orange text and not the blue text. Here we go again. So they're changing the shockwave. So instead of you doing 30% more damage for each element, now it takes the physical portion of the hit, if I'm reading it correctly, and this physical portion might be kind of low. For example, when you're playing Ice Strike, a lot of your damage is not physical. And then it multiplies that by 30 as extra damage of that element. So if that's how it works, in a lot of cases, it should be a nerf. And it also got its attack damage brought down significantly. It used to do 211%. Now it does 132. Not quite a 50% nerf, but remember Ice Strike with the bell? Remember that final endgame build that I showed you where we made the really strong character? We dropped the bell on the breach boss, deleted him? Nope. On-kill effects of Herald skills can no longer trigger from kills caused by Herald skills. Heralds can't trigger each other. This was carrying a lot of endgame builds. It's gone. Wind Dancer now has 10% evasion instead of 19. And Wind Dancer now is consumed by any hit from an enemy rather than melee attacks. So it's at a lower magnitude and it's going to go away faster. Now, raising your shield immediately after blocking a skill will perform a shield bash, and it'll stun enemies in front of you and it'll daze them. So that's a cool new mechanic if you use Raise Shield. I personally have never used Raise Shield, but there's a lot of nerfs coming into the game and they're making it harder. So maybe one day raising your shield is going to be a very good idea. Scroll down here, they nerfed pretty much nerfs across the board to a lot of supports. Scattershot supported skills now deal 35% less damage. This is a multiplicative downward spiral. So instead of going down 20, it's going down 35. Scattershot was very popular with a lot of skills, so it's brought down severely. At Serious Disdain, unique helmet let 10% of damage bypass energy shield, but there is a Lich Ascendancy node that says if you have energy shield, your life cannot be damaged. So they probably nerf the crap out of this because of the Lich's ability to not take life through their energy shield. Now, Everlasting Gaze, another spark thing. It used to give you 30% of your maximum mana as maximum energy shield. Now it's 6. From 30% to 6. Not only does it not work anymore from the previous node that we saw about how the calculations begin rather than ignoring the calculations early in the patch notes, the actual amulet just seems to be dead. So, oof. Same thing with Ghost Wrath. Remember this one? I told you this one was going away as well. Now it gives you 25% of your maximum life converted to energy shield, previously 50. Same idea. Hand of Wisdom in action. These were the gloves that made stat stacking godly. They made it a lot less godly. Stack stacking got a colossal nerf. Probably deserved it. I mean, you're moving at the speed of light, one-shotting everything. If you haven't seen it, you got to Google stat stacking Gemling Legionnaire. Take a look at it. I didn't make a build guide for it. I played it for a little bit. I didn't make a build guide for it because it was too expensive. Almost none of you would have had the currency to make the build. Why would I make a video for you that you can't make? That's the stupidest video to make ever. Ingenuity Unique Belt. So they actually nerfed this. Not only have they already nerfed it, they nerfed it actually multiple times in the patch notes. Like they had to refresh it. Now I think it's 30% increased bonus. It gives you 2 charm slots and If you don't know what Ingenuity is, it was the super endgame belt that gave you massive buffs to your 2 rings. Now they've clarified that the 3rd ring Ascendancy will not work, and instead of you getting 80%, now you get 30. It's a huge nerf. So it does have 2 charm slots. If charms are really good, Ingenuity might be good, but this doesn't really feel like so much of a chase item anymore. The unique shield used to have 666% effect of the socketed soul cores. Those are those really good socketables in the game. Now it has 100. So it's like a 6x nerf. It's insane. So more about the nerfs. The Warrior Invictus unique body armor. I believe this is the one from the Arbiter, right? The pinnacle boss. Well, they got rid of most of the really good rolls like rarity, life, mana, all attributes. And then they nerfed the other ones, like they now have a range on them. And then they added 7 new ones. Oak Sworn Unique Shield no longer provides plus 50 spirit. It now provides you 50% life regen. I have never seen someone use the Oak Sworn Unique Shield except for to provide 50 spirit. So they took away like all of this unique's value and replaced it with something that looks completely useless to me. So this is gone. Pillar of the Caged Gods, another weapon based on the stat stacking, nerfed as you can read through here. Everything is just nerfed across the board. The Temporalis unique body armor now causes skills to have -2 and -1 seconds. It used to be -4 and -2. Nerfed. All right, let's go to the item changes. Jeweler's Orbs now set a skill gem to have the specific number of support gem sockets rather than adding a support gem socket to a skill gem with a specific number of support gem sockets already. This is actually a buff. So what it means is if you find a perfect Jeweler's Orb, what you used to have to do is apply a Jeweler's Orb and then the Jeweler's Orb that makes it 5, and then finally the perfect Jeweler's Orb to have 6. Now, if you just apply a perfect Jeweler's Orb to anything, any old gem, it'll just automatically go to 6. You don't have to go one by one by one. It's a nice change. Advanced and expert item bases now have distinct names. That's good because it was confusing before. Runes now have 3 tiers. For example, the Storm Rune has been split into Lesser, Storm Rune, and Greater. And you can reforge 3 Lessers for 1 regular and 3 regulars for 1 greater. And they've doubled the drop rates of runes. The base damage of all crossbows has been increased. Crossbows also now have 2-handed versions of added damage modifiers instead of 1-handed versions they were using. Now, my comment here on crossbows, it's great that they're getting buffed. What I have always said in POE2 is my favorite build in the game is the not a crossbow build. I find crossbows to be insufferable to play. They're so clunky with their reload mechanics, and it just feels so weird playing it. There's just nothing fluid to it at all. So I'm very glad that we got the damage here, but what I'm really looking for is some of the fluidity from crossbows. Some things feel very, very strange, and I hope some of that has been fixed as well. Notable passive skills in the starting areas of each class can no longer be instilled. That's the extra power that you get on your amulet. So that's kind of interesting. I guess some of them are just really strong at the beginning, so they don't want you to be able to put it on your amulet. I guess I would call that a nerf. Let's look at monster changes. Armor on all monsters has been reduced by 30%. Well, I mean, that's good. I guess we'll take it. Armor is not a very good defensive stat right now. So, whatever, but I guess we'll take it. Soul Eater got nerfed, which is good. The monsters can't be as powerful. And the following pinnacle bosses have been adjusted at difficulty 0. They have half the life as before. That's going to help the casuals get ingratiated into the endgame. You'll be able to kill some pinnacle bosses. It's unchanged at tier 4. The Life of the Trial Master and Zarok, hopefully that's how you say it, the temporal have been reduced. And a lot of the bosses no longer have armor pen. Okay. The Silverfist dodge roll now does reduced damage. This actually 100 0'd me. You know the big ape in Act 3? He rolled 100 0'd my character. I was like, so you're telling me the gorillas roll 100 0'd my character? The roll is his movement skill. He 100 0'd me with a movement skill? Oh my god. So I'm very glad to see that. Reduce the maximum number of monsters that can be alive at once in a ritual encounter, particularly earlier in the game. I hope this is going to help us with the King of the Mist zone at level 10, because those rituals spawn so many monsters and you're just like a little baby character. It's actually kind of insane. Bloated Miller, the very first boss on the beach, now just pushes you aside instead of carrying you along. That's nice. He's taken me for quite a few rides, if you know what I mean. User interface changes. Hovering over any instance of presence keyword will now show an indicator around your characters so you can see what presence is. Remember, they nerfed it from 6 to 4. Well, I guess the good news is at least you can see what it looks like now. Let's scroll down here to bug fixes. There was at least one I wanted to show you. So fixed a bug where sources of less minimum or more maximum physical attack damage, such as Hess support or Raislata's coil unique belt, were not working correctly with damage conversion. There was a interesting bug that went on forever where heft was used as a support for everything that wouldn't make any sense. People say, I don't know what to tell you, Rax. It works. So that's why you saw it put in a lot of my guides. They fixed it. So now heft isn't used on anything. Or not that it isn't used on anything, but it'll be used more for what it's intended for. And then, okay, listen to this one. Fixed a bug where quality on scepters multiplied the amount of spirit they granted instead of granting quality to their inherent skill. So, for example, if you have a rattling scepter and you're a minion witch, this is what I put in my guide, you might think, well, the main thing that you want to do is equality the scepter with spirit on it to get more spirit so you can summon more arsonists, right? Well, they said, nope. What we wanted it to do was instead quality the little skellies you get from the scepter. We don't want that. What we want is more spirit so we can get more arsonists. So this is just a nerf to minion builds or anything that uses a scepter. And that's about it. So, what are my thoughts on this patch? So, I guess what I'm about to say might actually surprise you, because it might probably just sounded like that whole video I was just a big negative Nancy there. In general, I would much rather have a patch like this than allowing us to do millions and millions and millions of damage and one-shot everything instantly forever. I do not fault grinding gear games at all for taking control of their game, especially in early access. I think this gives us a little bit of insight into their design philosophy, which they have kind of alluded to, that they want the game to be very difficult. I think another thing that they're saying is if the community finds anything that's crazy good, we can expect it to be nerfed. Anything that's truly out of line will be swiftly brought back in line. And, my initial thought is probably like most people get really, really mad. Oh, there goes my build, like my 4 YouTube videos or my build guides. Everyone's going to say they suck now, whatever. Probably for the long-term health of the game, a lot of these changes really make sense. Spark is insane. Okay. The stat stacking Gemling Legionnaire is insane. Fine. I'm really not looking forward to all the crowd control. Not looking forward to that at all. All the ailments and all the stuns being applied to me. I will try to combat it the best I can with my build guides. And I hope I don't log in on Friday. Just keep getting chain crowd control. That's going to really grind my gears, pun intended. I'm still looking forward to Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. We play the Huntress. Let's try it. I'm expecting the game to be a lot harder. If they release a full list of like all the actual skill changes, I will read them. Especially I will read them for all the guides that I made. What's the damage of SRS? What's the damage of Ice Strike? What's the damage of Lightning Arrow? What's the damage of Orb of Storms? Spark? Where did they actually move it to? Who knows? Maybe they're going to buff some of the skills in the early game. And maybe let us get through the campaign a little bit easier. But I guess what I'm really interested in is what do you guys think? How do you feel about these changes? Does this make you more or less excited to play Path of Exile 2? At the end of the day, I am still looking forward to the patch. I'm guessing, I don't think I'll have as negative of a take as maybe some of the other content creators. I already know some of them are absolutely have their blood boiling. I guess I will say one thing. One comment that I'll make here, which kind of had me scratching my head, is in the interview that Grinding Gear Games had, they said something to the effect of they don't want to nerf everything when something is broken. They only want to nerf the specific part that is broken about it. Okay. But if we look at the Spark Sorcerer or the Stat Stacker, they nerfed every lever that they could pull. All of it was nerfed. All of it. Your ability to stack percentage mana, Archmage. We talked about this 15 times, so I don't have to go over it all again. But I guess my question would be, did they calculate that every single one of these levers had to be pulled? Or are they just like, oh, just nerf everything, it's out of control? It certainly feels like they just nerfed everything, which is crazy, but I don't know. So I'll have a video for you tomorrow. What I was going to do, I'm kind of an ambitious person. What I was going to do is I was going to make like a bunch of actual like build guides ahead of time and try to make like a really good Huntress build and da 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 da. But after seeing these patch notes, I'm very well aware that any video or build that I make you, I couldn't possibly guarantee any of it. I don't think anybody can guarantee anything at this point. So instead, I will make you a video about my plans. Like, here's what I'm going to do. And you will get a build guide from me immediately from my plans there. It's going to be like a Huntress and a Lich guide. And then I got to go back to all my old builds and maybe play them all and fix them or determine that they're dead, one or the other, and mess around with it. So many more build guides are coming. Don't worry, I will figure out whatever's strong and I'll make build guides for you. We'll still get through it. We're going to get through this together, guys. But I would genuinely love to know what you think down below. If you bother to leave me a comment, I will read them all. Unless I wake up tomorrow and there's like 4,000 comments. That might be tough. But any reasonable amount of comments, I'll read them all. Thank you.